If someone asked me when my childhood ended, I wouldn't say it was the day my dad died. I'd say it was the day I realized the people who called themselves family didn't actually see me as family. My name is Emma Parker. I'm 13 years old, and this is the story of how I lost everything and somehow found hope again. My dad, Michael Parker, was a high school history teacher in Columbus, Ohio. He wasn't rich. He drove the same old pickup truck for years, wore the same brown jacket every winter, and never cared about expensive things. But to me, he was the richest man in the world. Every Friday night, we ordered pizza, watched old movies, and laughed until Mom told us to keep the noise down. Dad always told me, "Emma, people won't remember how much money you had. They'll remember how you made them feel." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I wish I had listened more carefully. One rainy afternoon, Dad was driving home from school when a speeding truck ran a red light. The police arrived at our house before dinner. The moment Mom opened the door and saw the officers, she collapsed before they even spoke. Dad never came home again. Everything changed after the funeral. Our house felt empty. Mom stopped singing while she cooked. She barely smiled anymore. I tried to stay strong because my little brother Noah was only 7. Every night he asked the same question, "When is Dad coming back?" And every night, I had no answer. 3 months later, my Uncle David Collins, Dad's older brother, started visiting more often. He acted kind. He brought groceries. He hugged Mom. He kept saying, "Michael would have wanted me to take care of you." Mom trusted him. So did I. One evening, he sat at our kitchen table and gently said, "Sarah, this house is too expensive for you now. Sell it. Move in with us for a while. We'll get through this together." Mom hesitated, but medical bills were piling up. She couldn't afford the mortgage by herself. So she agreed. We sold our home. Every dollar from the sale went into Uncle David's hands because he promised to buy another house for us after everything settled down. That house never existed. Instead, we moved into his home. The first week felt normal. His wife smiled. His son Lucas let Noah play with his toys. I actually believed things were getting better. Then everything slowly changed. One Monday morning, my aunt woke me up at 5 o'clock. "Emma, the kitchen isn't going to clean itself." Before school, I washed dishes, mopped the floors, folded laundry, packed everyone's lunches, and cleaned the bathrooms. By the time I finished, everyone else was already eating breakfast. Lucas had bacon, eggs, pancakes, and orange juice. I got one piece of dry toast. When I quietly asked if I could have an egg too, my aunt looked at me with cold eyes. "Food costs money, Emma. Learn to be grateful." I nodded, even though my stomach hurt from hunger. School became the only place where I felt normal. At least there, nobody treated me like I didn't belong. But every afternoon, the moment I walked back through that front door, I became the unpaid maid again. One evening, I found Mom quietly crying in the laundry room. She quickly wiped away her tears when she saw me. "I'm okay," she whispered, but I noticed the bandages on her hands. She had been cleaning so much that her skin had cracked open. She didn't want me to worry. That only made it hurt more. The hardest part wasn't what they did to me. It was watching them slowly break my mom. Then one afternoon, I came home from school and found Noah sitting alone on the back steps. His eyes were red. He was hugging his knees. I sat beside him. "What's wrong?" He looked at me and whispered. I was hungry, so I poured myself a glass of milk. He paused before finishing. Aunt Karen slapped my hand and poured it back into the carton. Something inside me shattered. I walked into the kitchen without saying a word. I picked up the sandwich I had saved from school and handed it to Noah. He smiled like I had just given him the greatest gift in the world. He had only taken one bite when Aunt Karen walked in. She ripped the sandwich out of his hands. Without saying a word, she threw it straight into the trash. Noah stared at the garbage can. He didn't cry. He just looked hungry. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat beside my bedroom window. I looked up at the stars and whispered, "Dad, if you can hear me, please help us." I didn't know it then, but the very next morning, someone would knock on our front door and reveal a secret my father had been protecting all along. The next morning, someone knocked on the front door just after sunrise. Uncle David frowned as he opened it. Standing outside was an older man with silver hair, a worn leather briefcase, and kind blue eyes. For a long moment, he simply looked at the house. Then he asked quietly, "Is this Michael Parker's family?" The moment I heard my dad's name, I stepped into the hallway. Uncle David answered before anyone else could speak. "Michael passed away months ago. Can I help you?" The man slowly nodded. "My name is Robert Hayes. Michael and I were best friends for over 20 years. He looked past Uncle David and saw me. His eyes filled with tears. "You must be Emma." I nodded. He smiled sadly. "You have your father's smile." For the first time since Dad died, Someone said something that made me feel close to him again. Uncle David quickly stepped between us. If this is just a visit, we're actually very busy today. Robert didn't move. I'm afraid this isn't just a visit. He lifted his briefcase. Michael left something with me. He told me only his wife and children should receive it. I noticed Uncle David's face suddenly become tense. He forced a smile. Well, come inside. We all sat in the living room. Robert carefully opened the briefcase. Inside was a thick folder, several documents, an old family photo, and a sealed envelope. Across the front, written in my father's handwriting, were the words, "For Emma." My hand shook as I opened it. Inside was a short letter. "My sweet Emma, if you're reading this, it means life didn't go the way I hoped. I need you to remember something. Hard times never last forever. If anyone ever tries to take away your hope, don't believe them. Trust Robert. I trust him with my family's future. And never forget, I love you more than words could ever say. Dad." By the time I finished reading, tears blurred every word. Mom quietly covered her face and cried. Robert waited until we calmed down before speaking again. Michael knew he might not have much time. He prepared for that. Uncle David leaned forward. "What exactly do you mean?" Robert took another folder from the briefcase. "Michael created a family trust before he died." The room went silent. Mom looked completely shocked. "He never told me." "He wanted it to be a surprise," Robert replied. "He said if anything happened to him, this trust would protect you and the kids." Uncle David tried to sound calm. "How much money are we talking about?" Robert didn't answer immediately. Instead, he looked directly at Mom. "There is enough to pay for Emma's education, Noah's education, your medical bills, and give you a fresh start." I watched something change in Uncle David's eyes. Not sadness, not relief. Greed. Within minutes, everything changed. My aunt suddenly smiled at me. "Emma, honey, why don't I make your favorite pancakes?" Favorite? She had never even asked what my favorite food was. Lucas walked over and patted Noah on the shoulder. "Want to play video games later?" Yesterday, he wouldn't even let Noah touch the controller. Now he acted like the nicest cousin in the world. I looked at my mom. She noticed it too. Robert noticed everything. He quietly closed the folder. Then he said something that froze the entire room. "Michael gave me one more responsibility." Everyone looked at him. "If I ever believed his family was being mistreated..." He paused. "I was instructed to protect them." Uncle David forced a nervous laugh. "You're making it sound like we've done something wrong." Robert slowly stood up. He looked at my worn-out sneakers, the faded bruise on my mother's wrist, the patches sewn onto Noah's jeans. Then he looked straight at Uncle David. "I've seen enough." Without another word, he pulled out his phone. He made one call. Less than 20 minutes later, a lawyer and 2 Child Protective Services investigators pulled into the driveway. For the first time since my father died, I saw fear on Uncle David's face. And somehow, I knew our lives were about to change forever. The house felt completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. A few moments later, the 2 Child Protective Services investigators walked inside with a lawyer. They introduced themselves politely before asking everyone to stay in the living room. One investigator smiled gently at me. "Emma, would you mind showing us where you sleep?" I glanced nervously at my mom. She gave me a small nod. "It's okay." I led them upstairs. When I opened my bedroom door, both investigators stopped. It wasn't really a bedroom. It was a small storage room with one narrow bed, squeezed between old boxes and broken furniture. There wasn't even a closet. Just a few plastic bins holding all my clothes. One investigator quietly took notes. The other asked, "Do you sleep here every night?" "Yes." She looked around again. "Does your cousin have his own room?" I nodded. "He has the biggest room in the house." Next, they asked to see Noah's room. He didn't even have one. He slept on a folding mattress in the laundry room. The investigators looked at each other without saying a word. Then they walked into the kitchen. They opened the refrigerator. It was full, but almost everything inside had sticky notes with Lucas's name on it. One investigator turned toward me. "Emma, when was the last time you ate a full meal?" I didn't answer. I was afraid. Mom stepped closer and gently held my hand. She whispered, "You don't have to protect anyone anymore." That was all it took. Months of fear came pouring out. I told them everything. Getting up before sunrise every day to clean the house. Going to school hungry. Watching Noah cry because he wasn't allowed to drink a glass of milk. Seeing Mom work until her hands bled. And the money from our old house, the money Uncle David promised to protect, that had simply disappeared. The lawyer quietly opened another folder. He placed several bank statements on the table. Every transfer, every purchase, every signature. The money hadn't disappeared at all. Uncle David had used it to buy a new SUV. He renovated his business. He paid for Lucas's private school tuition. Every dollar that belonged to us had been spent on himself. Mom covered her mouth and broke down crying. "I trusted you," she whispered. "You were Michael's brother." Uncle David couldn't even look at her. For the first time, he had nothing to say. That afternoon, CPS made its decision. Mom, Noah, and I would leave the house immediately. A temporary home had already been arranged while the court handled the case. As we packed our few belongings, I picked up the last picture I had of Dad. Everything else could be replaced. Not that photo. When we walked out the front door, it felt like I was leaving behind years of pain. A week later, Robert invited us to his office. He placed a small wooden box on the desk. Michael wanted you to have this. Inside were Dad's watch, his wedding ring, family photos, and a small flash drive. Robert plugged it into his computer. A video appeared on the screen. There was Dad, smiling, just like I remembered. "Hey, Em," he said, "if you're watching this, then I'm probably telling this story from heaven." I couldn't stop crying. He smiled gently. "I know life may seem unfair right now, but don't let pain turn your heart into something bitter." Then he reached for a folder beside him. "I have one last surprise." Robert paused the video and handed Mom another envelope. Inside were the deed to a small house and documents for a rental property Dad had quietly purchased years earlier. The rental income had been growing in a protected trust ever since. Dad hadn't just left us memories, he had left us a future. Enough money for Mom's medical care, enough for Noah and me to finish college, enough for us to start over. Months later, the court ordered Uncle David to repay every dollar he had taken. He was convicted of fraud and financial exploitation. As officers escorted him from the courtroom, he stopped in front of me, his eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, Emma. I should have treated you like my own daughter." I looked at him for a long moment. Then I quietly answered, "I forgive you, but forgiveness doesn't erase the choices you made." He lowered his head and walked away. 5 years passed. Mom was healthy again. Noah was thriving in school, and I fulfilled the promise I had made to my father. I became a teacher. Every year, I watched children walk into my classroom carrying invisible pain. Some came from broken homes, some felt forgotten, some believed they weren't enough. Whenever I saw that look in their eyes, I remembered the scared 13-year-old girl I used to be. One autumn afternoon, a little girl stayed behind after class. She looked down at the floor and whispered, "My uncle says I'll never be good at anything." I knelt beside her desk, smiled, and repeated the same words my father had once told me. "Your value is never decided by the people who fail to see it." That evening, I visited Dad's grave. The sun was setting behind the trees. I placed fresh flowers beside his headstone. Then I smiled through my tears. "You are right, Dad. Real wealth isn't money. It's kindness. It's love. It's leaving people stronger than you found them." A gentle breeze moved through the trees. For just a moment, it felt like he was standing beside me again, and somehow, I knew he was proud.